Alright, so today we're doing a HP Laserjet 6L/5L with printouts that are slightly blurry depending on the weather and temperature where you live. The amount of blurriness that you get will vary. It's been about 10 years since I've fixed one of these machines for this problem, but they just seem to keep popping up periodically with people who are stuck using MS-DOS and they can't update their printer. Alright, so I'm just going to briefly go through as to what the cause is. There's other videos on YouTube about getting the cover off. I'm just going to quickly rip it off and show you what the cause is. Now, years ago, the flavour of the day was that all Hewlett-Packard and Canon trained technicians would say, "Oh, the problem of it is the laser unit. You need to replace the laser unit," because that's what Hewlett-Packard and Canon are all about, replacing parts rather than fixing the parts that are at the problem. So this is the laser unit. I've already partially disassembled it. I thought I'd make one of these videos because it's a pretty common sort of problem. There's probably still a few of these machines out there still being used. Now, if you were to take it to a HP technician, he would charge you a lot of money to change this entire unit. But there's no need to change the unit, because the unit, the fogginess of the printouts, the blurry sort of foggy printouts, is caused by glue. So the source of the problem is the focusing lens, which focuses the laser beam from the infrared laser diode. So there's a tiny little glass lens inside here. It's stuck on with some glue that when the glue heats up, it evaporates and gives off a oily mist. So it's just a matter of getting some pliers, going in, grabbing the lens and just give it a twist. Break the glue bead that's glued it down, and then you've got to push the cover in. Ideally you're doing it two-handed, of course. And then this should just come off. And there it is. So don't go breaking any of the glue off the lens. When you pull it off, as you use the blue bit there, as a guide as to where it sits back in, because this moves in and out in order to focus the laser beam. So you use the dried glue as a guide as to where the original position was. So when you push it on, because the glue has formed this kind of conical shape, it will touch against here, and that's where you lock it back into position. You don't have to re-glue it, because there's enough, unless you're going to be transporting the printer, over 1,000 kilometers in a truck. If you're just going to take it and put it back to where you've brought it from your house, it's not going to jiggle around, it's not going to fall off. You can just let it sit there. And if you have to pull it out again to clean it in another 4 to 5 years, then you'll have it nice and easy, ready to go. So what you've got to do now is you've got to put a small toothpick or a screwdriver through the shadow mask that you can see in there. It's that black sort of piece at the bottom, and you can see there, that's the lens, the focusing lens, and you can see how foggy this one is. And the reason it's gone foggy is because of the glue that they've used to bind it to the plastic housing. The glue, when it heats up, gives off this oily sort of vapor, and that's what makes it go foggy. So you've got to put like a toothpick through there, and what we're going to do is we're going to push this lens up and out and make sure you don't drop it or lose it. Because when it comes out, it's pretty hard to find. And just make sure, just make sure you don't lose it when it comes out. Okay, so I'll just pause the video because I'm not going to do this one-handed, because it's if you lose this, then you've got to buy a whole new laser unit, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so now we've got this lens out. I've got a really good trick. We just use a old head lice comb. It's got a nice hole for the handle where it hooks on, and it just so happens that the lens fits into that nice little hole. And you take a toothpick and we put it down the hole, and then we just gently push the lens out. Pull our toothpick out, and there we have the culprit of all our blurry printing. I think the number of printers that got thrown away into landfill simply because this tiny little lens has gone all foggy. Or the number of laser units that were unnecessarily changed by factory trained technicians, or because they were too lazy to discover what the actual cause of the problem was. So all you got to do is just now clean that lens with metho or car polish if you want to make it really shiny and glossy. Car polish puts a thin film of wax across it, and that'll stop if the temperatures that the printer gets subject to go too high, and this starts to give off its vapor that makes the lens go foggy. If you polish the lens up with some car polish, not Carnubra wax type car polish, but a synthetic Teflon based car polish, it just stops this from going foggy again. And then all you got to do is, once you've got it nice and polished and perfectly clean, just flip the lens back over, and then just put it back on, push it back on, and then give it a following clean once it's back in the home position. And then reassemble your printer, and you'll find you'll have perfectly clear prints, just as if you bought it straight out of the box. Okay, so I've just polished that lens up using a bit of toilet paper and a bit of nail polish remover. I'd use car wipe polish, but I can't find any at the moment, so this does just a good job. See there the difference in the lens. It's now pretty much crystal clear. Definitely a sight better than what it was before we pulled it out. So we'll go and put that back in. Once you push it in, just give it a re-clean on the outside, because you'll get oils from your finger when you go pushing it back down into the home position. And yep, real easy fix, requires no parts, just simply requires time. And that was one of the most common repairs that we carried out in around 1998 to 2000. I must have done over 300 of these printers for this problem. And because we knew how to fix it without replacing parts, we ended up getting the majority of the work because we could do it at a price that no one else could even get close to, because they never bothered to investigate as to what was actually causing the problem. They'd have to go and buy a laser unit from HP or Canon, which was like $90 to $120 depending on who your distributor was, when we just repaired the whole unit for $150, including the supposed parts. So there you go. Let's go put that back in and see how the printer runs. Okay, so we've now pushed that back on and we just let it sit there freely. We use the old glue as a guide as to where the focal point is. So you just push it on and the glue should stop it from going any further. And just let it sit there. I mean, if you're really pedantic, you can put a tiny little drop of nail polish on there to re-glue it into position, but there's no need because there's enough pressure there for it to pretty much stay locked in. The only way it will come out is if you drop the printer on the floor, and let's face it, with a 20-year-old printer, if you drop it on the floor, the plastic's that brittle that it's going to smash into a million pieces anyway. Alright, that's it. So if you put it all back together and you find it is still a little bit blurry, you may have put this focusing lens back in the wrong position. So just pull the covers off and pull it out a little bit, just a little tiny little bit, and that'll refocus the lens. So we'll give it a go and see how it looks. Okay, so let's see how it prints. Now it's all back together with a nice clean lens. A little bit slow on the processing, these old printers. Let's have a look. And that looks pretty good. All nice and clear. Look at the fine print. See, it's all nice and sharp again. And that's the source of your problem, that tiny little lens. I'd hate to think the number of times over the years I've had to pull these machines apart and clean it. It's been 10 years since I've done one of these. I couldn't believe it when the customer walked in with one. I almost turned him away, but then he explained to me that he had a particular piece of software that only ran on DOS, and not being one wanting to frig around with today's modern printers trying to make it work with DOS, I thought it would be cheaper and quicker for him just to fix his old printer. Anyway, there's several other problems this printer has had. I might make separate videos about the other problems. If you're familiar with this model of series of HP, they had a big issue with paper jamming, where the unit would take more than one sheet of paper when it's feeding down. That particular problem is caused by the separator pad down in here failing. HP did release a kit which came looking like this. I'm just fortunate enough that I've got about 200 of these in storage. I just about chucked them out and before Christmas, because I thought no one's going to come in with one of these. And this is the real quick, easy way of repairing it. And it actually does a better job than pulling the entire machine apart just to get down into the separator pad in there. This thing simply slots in like so. You do 3 actions, push it down, and it deposits a new separator pad down on top of the old separator pad. And because the springs that push on the separator pad that's pretty much sagging now, they're not putting as much pressure, so when you put this new separator pad over the top of the old separator pad, it takes up the lag that the spring that puts the pressure onto the separator pad up, and then it feeds perfectly. It's pretty much a permanent sort of a fix. Yeah, so that's it for today's video. Hope that answers your questions, solves your problems, and have a nice day.